Welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I'm your host, Kibin Alleyne, covering for Darren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. If you're asking the question, what is this show all about? We bring you a forum discussion providing a deeper understanding of the issues and inequities many communities face. From systemic inequalities to pressing social problems, our guests will provide multiple perspectives and insights to help us better understand and address these challenges. We invite you to stay connected with us as the Social Justice Forum starts now. Welcome back. In recent years, the rise in book bans and challenges in U.S. public schools has sparked heated debates over censorship and the freedom to read. As Republican led states enact new laws limiting access to certain books, including those addressing LGBTQ issues and racial history, the impact on students, educators, and communities continues to grow. Joining us to tell us more is the executive board member at the American Library Association and chief librarian at Queens Public Library, Nick Buron. Nick, thank you so much for joining me.
Good day, Kibin. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Now, what do you think is driving the significant increase in book bans across the U.S. from 2023 to 2024?
Yeah, it is a worrying uh, activity that has been taking place not only since 2023, but quite honestly, for quite a while. It is something that in the last few years we have seen the rise of um, the rise of individuals, a very small minority of individuals taking it upon themselves, feeling empowered uh, by the animosity around them to attack libraries for holding the issues that we hold dear in libraries, which is, freedom of access, freedom of reading, freedom of choice to read what you and your family want to read. And quite honestly, some people don't like that.
Now, as you mentioned, this has been something that has been going on since before 2023, and it's tripling, especially over the past year. What do you think this trend signals about the state of freedom of expression in the United States?
Yeah. You know, we've always talked about, banning of books has been an issue in libraries, going all the way back decades and decades and decades. And in those times, really, the issue was, I don't like this one book. But right now, what we're seeing is smaller groups of individuals saying, coming with a piece of paper that's saying, I want these 100 books taken out of your library. And whether that be a school library, a public library, the difference is that many of these people are coming from outside the community to come into your community, to come into other people's community and tell them and their community what they should read. What is driving them is a need to control the narrative of expression. You asked about, what does this do with expression? The important thing that they're taking out of these libraries is an opportunity for all people, but especially young people, to be able to deal with issues that many authors are dealing with, very difficult issues, especially in youth, whether they be issues of depression, of grief, of death, of substance abuse, of suicide, and writing them in a way that's a narrative that a lot of young people can explore and be able to, find comfort in. And for some reason, it is that expression that other people from outside the community want to take away. And that not only is disturbing, but it actually has great consequences for many of our youth.
Now, with that, how do these book bans also affect, a young person, but specifically a student's access to diverse viewpoints and critical discussions that could be held in the classroom?
We always say at the library that people need to see themselves in the library. People need to see themselves in the literature. And when you don't, you're made to feel as the outsider. And so many of the books that are being banned, 44% of the books being banned have to do with people of color. 39% of the books being banned are LGBTQ plus books. So what's being taken out is not across the board. It's it's individuals, again, from outside that community that is coming into your community, that is coming into other people's community and telling them that whether it's their history in nonfiction books or fiction books, saying that I don't want you represented. I want to try to erase you. Can you imagine the feeling that a young person would have to go in and being told that the books that are talking to me are somehow wrong, and that there must be therefore something wrong with me? It has a tremendous impact on how people feel about themselves. The best thing that libraries do is that they represent all the community, and that are reflective in their collections. And then when we welcome everybody, which is what libraries do, then we empower everyone, their families, and their communities to be their best.
And I also want to expand on that and say that some of the books that are being banned are from authors that have been loved for a very long time, like James Baldwin. His "Go Tell It to the Mountain" is being targeted for a ban. Books like "Roots" by Alex Haley is being targeted. Can you explain what message this is also sending to America when we ban certain books like this?
And when you say certain books, you're absolutely correct. I mean, what do they all have in common is a part of history that some people don't want to see represented in America. And what that does is, like I said earlier, it's trying to erase, you know, people's people's history. Um, the best thing that we can, history is history. It's facts. But when we try to select the facts that we want people to learn, then we are erasing the people that are no longer heard from. You're right, like Bluest Eyes, um, Slaughterhouse Five, Forever. Stephen King books. We're talking about other people coming into your community and saying that I want to make decisions for you. This is too sensitive for you. This is something that I don't want you to learn about. This is embarrassing to U.S. history. But history is history. And the best thing that we can do is address true facts. But when other people try to select those facts, they are trying to create the narrative for the future. So by telling you what books you should read now, they're telling you how I want you to think in the future.
Now, Iowa and Florida have passed laws banning materials about sexual orientation, gender identity, and sexual conduct. How do you view the legal challenges these laws are facing?
So, when we hear words like that, what is that? That in and of itself is a fuzzy, right? It's like sexual orientation, sexual content. It's so broad, and that is done intentionally to be so broad that the people the laws are created like that in those communities, in those states. And then when it comes down to the community basis, it's maybe one person that's making a decision that this is, this is the sexual content I don't want you to know. This is the sexual orientation I don't want you to know. And so while the law is broad, how it's applied is very subjective in these communities. And that's the thing that, we're allowing communities, whether it's in Florida, whether it's in Iowa, we're letting small groups of people. And this is it. This is what one of the points I really want to get across is that this is being enacted. These book bans are being enacted by a small group of vocal minority of people who are implementing this for the large majority of people that do not believe on both spectrums. On the full spectrum, political spectrum, most people do not believe that books should be banned wholesale. And so when a vocal minority comes in to say that this is what it should be, and then a very small group of people, maybe one, maybe two people, maybe it's a school board of 5 people that only 3 people believe that, then they're interpreting the law to their version of what they deem to be inappropriate. And that is very dangerous when a few people are bringing this list and a few people are making the decisions for thousands and thousands of young people that need these materials in order to have a positive, view and a correct view of what is going on in the world.
Now, can you explain the concept of soft censorship and how it's impacting library and public spaces?
Yeah, and this is really, to me, when we talk about banning books, it makes national attention. When we talk about challenges, it doesn't sound as severe as actually burning, but this is really the thing that is very dangerous as well, especially in communities that don't have traditional banning of books. Now, we happen to live in a city that is very welcoming of other people's points of view. We live around people that look different than us, that celebrate different than us, that love different than us, that are coming from different places in the world. And that allows us in this city to, I think, be more accommodating to that someone's going to read something different than I read, and I'm not going to take that away from them. However, we experience schools, public libraries, here, other parts of the country, where someone might come in and might yell at the children's librarian in a public library saying, you shouldn't have this book. They're not saying get rid of it. They're not making a formal complaint. But what they're doing is they're putting pressure at that moment on that librarian. And if it's, a children's librarian, they might be in that room by themselves. Very intimidating to have someone yell at them. It might be a school librarian who's the only librarian in that school. And while it doesn't have impact that day, it very well might have impact when they go to make their choices for what kind of books they're going to buy in the future. And then they think, listen, I think that these books should be in the library, but why am I going to do this to myself? Why am I going to take the chance to have to defend every single book that this one person or this person and their friends are going to come in, and so that book doesn't get purchased? And that is the quiet way that some professionals, whether they want to or not, we want to keep our staff safe. And that is our goal. And people want to be safe. And if they feel like if I buy this book, that it's going to come back at me in the form of someone yelling at me, why should I do that to myself and to my school or my library? And so that book is never purchased. Sometimes people come in and they see a book that they don't like, and they're not going to yell and scream about it. They're not going to make a formal complaint to their library. They're going to take that book, and they're either going to try to get out of the library and throw it away, throw it in the garbage. I have seen books that are hidden behind other books on a shelf so that other people can't find them. And so there are little ways that this is done. And, knowing that, knowing what librarians face, the best way to combat this soft censorship, this feeling that the staff doesn't feel safe because someone's yelling at them, is to make the staff, our staff in schools, feel supported, that they can stand up to this, so that when they do have somebody who is challenging them but doesn't want to make a formal complaint to the institution, they feel that they have strong grounds and they have talking points that they could defend, the freedom to read for everybody.
And I kind of want to expand on that similarly. What role do publishers, teachers, students, and parents play in resisting book bans, and how can they advocate for the freedom to read?
So one of the things that we all can do is know the environment that's out there. And I think that is really getting out across the country, across our city. People know there are people out there that want to take your right to read freely away from you and your family. And the best thing to do is to be able to stand up when you see that. Now, like I said, in our community, we don't have as many challenges as you might think. However, they are there. But there are people dealing with these challenges in other places, and you can go find them and support them. So, for your family, I recommend that people have an open discussion in their home about, what are you reading? Some of our, the families that come in, are taking books out, letting their kids read because they're having discussion with them. They're having a trust with them that their kids can come in, take what they want, and have a relationship with them to discuss this. I think that families could make decisions among themselves about what their kids can and might not be appropriate to read. And that is for their family to make. When we're talking about, banning, book banning, we're talking about people taking that right away from other people. And so being prepared, though, for when that day does come, and it might come at any neighborhood, anybody's school, where someone is trying to take away that right to read freely. When that happens, people are prepared with other parents to stand up at their school board meetings, that come to the library to support the library, to say, this is unacceptable and this is not what this country is all about.
Now, further kind of going on to that point, what can be done to prevent book bans from being used as a political tool that affects educational content and intellectual freedom? And I say that because I think just as like a little girl learning to read, I never thought, a book, although there could be political content within the book, that just the book simply existing can become political. So what can we do to kind of step away from that?
That's an interesting point, that the book itself even existing is political. This is one of the things that, is relatively new. The thing is, what I think that, by the library being able to, to purchase all material that people want in the community is in itself an act of nonpartisanship. We're bringing in everything. And so the library is not being political by buying these materials. The library is actually being nonpartisan by bringing in all points of view. And so as, we get the message out that, library is nonpartisan, that people can come here and get anything, that they're looking for, that the decisions that they make, when they come in, you can read about all sorts of points of view. And, to be able to provide that to communities is, really important. I'm not sure I answered your question very well.
No, that's okay. I definitely wanted to kind of put that out there. Just having this conversation alone is so eye-opening, because I remember kind of hearing like little, buzzing words about, book bans, and automatically thinking it's the worst book possibly known to man. And then seeing an author like James Baldwin, it's like, oh, there's something deeper there. And I'm glad that we're exploring it.
And even, even the term, saying book bans and book banning, I'll be honest with you, we're taking the language of people that want to ban these books and using their language, when, it might be better to, just to flip it a little bit and say, listen, reading freely, the freedom to read is what we are advocating. We're not we are definitely advocating. We are, we unite against book bans for sure. And that is, one of the best websites that anyone can go to, unite against book bans. That being said, what we're really advocating for in this United States here is the freedom to read. One of the things that we did on the Freedom to Read Day of Action, which took place in October, is we at the Queens Public Library had an event where we actually had people from other places in the world, people who have immigrated here to the United States. And what they did on that day is they didn't read banned books from the United States. They read banned books that were banned in the countries where they were coming from. And so people have come here to the United States because they are fleeing places where books that they wanted to read were being banned, that by reading them here, by us giving them access to them at the Queens Public Library, they were able to read books that they otherwise were not able to access in their home country, because they came here because they believe that America is the place where they can find freedom. And one of those freedoms is the freedom to read.
Well, Nick, with that, I want to thank you so much for joining us, having this very important discussion to talk about the freedom, just having the freedom to read. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a great opportunity.
We have to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this.
We're going to start the show right now. This is my favorite part. Ready in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hey, this is Angel, and I am one of the instructors for the in-studio production. Here at BronxNet, we offer classes that can help you elevate, expand, and start your television career. All you have to do is sign up at bronxnet.org/education. For the past 7 years, I have been in various productions, spanning from talk shows, independent films, news reports, art displays, teachings, musical performances, and many more. Ain't that right, Angel? Yeah, you're absolutely right, Angel. There are a lot of creative individuals that we're just waiting to sign up for the class. And if I may, can I also express Thank you, Angel. That's all the time we have left. Visit BronxNet.org/education and become a producer by taking the course. The class I offer is also in English, en español y también bilingüe. Nos vemos en la próxima clase.
Welcome back. Around the world, communities face immense challenges, from natural disasters to climate change and even social issues like crime and inequality. But there's a group of young adults stepping up to make a difference, students who believe in the power of collective action. ASES is an international group consisting of university student volunteers who act to address the pressing needs of communities around the world. Joining us to tell us more is ASES Church of God Student Volunteer Group's Regional Director, Victor Lozada, and ASES Student Volunteers, Urieli Tavares and Elisa Urena. Thank you all so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Now, Victor, can you share the origins of ASES and how it has grown to operate in over 175 countries?
Yeah, so ASES are the student volunteers group of the World Mission Society Church of God, which was founded in 1964 by Chrisan Sanghong. And the premise of it was to be the salt and the light of the earth, taking action to improve our communities. So after learning that in the church, in 2015, the students decided to bring that to their colleges and universities. And so they started ASES, which is acronym for Save the Earth from A to Z. We just played around with the letters, put the A at the beginning and the Z at the end, just like in the alphabet. And then they wanted to bring what they learned in church to their campus so that other people outside of just our church can also participate in taking action in these. So throughout the world, there's about 175 countries where the church is located, with about 7,500 churches. And this year actually is our 60th anniversary. Since
That's amazing.
1964 it
Congratulations.
was founded. So we're very pleased to have achieved such a success throughout the world. And it's how we've been able to manage expanding the group and the activities that we carry out.
Now, can you just quickly let us know, how does ASES engage university students to become future leaders in their communities and beyond?
So it teaches the students to understand the problems that are facing the community. So we do that by having meetings with local leaders, police officers, police chiefs, assemblymen, councilors, senators, even just their school president and different community leaders, so that they can get engaged and understand what's happening. And then we, after we identify the problem, we make tasks that students can take, small bites to the big apple. And then through that, they can learn how to operate and partake. And later on, as they move on from college, they can carry that out at their workforce, or they can venture into other parts of government or any kind of leadership role. They can see themselves making a difference.
That's amazing. And Urieli and Elisa, I'm curious to know what inspired you to get involved.
For starters, I've always had a passion for seeing a difference in my community. One thing I would say is it's a satisfaction to see a change in your community and to know that you made that change as well. It's a great feeling.
That's amazing. And for you?
Hi. So for me, I've always been passionate about making an impact and a difference in the world, but I never was sure where to fit in. But through ASES, I realized that not only was I making a difference in my community, but also worldwide through the cleanups, through the partnerships that we have. And meeting with public officials, it's really been a great difference to me.
That's amazing. Now, I know that being a college student, it's a lot of work. It definitely takes effort. But how do you balance your academic responsibilities with your volunteer work?
Yeah, it's no secret that we do get a lot of work, and it's a balance of not only school life, but also your personal life and things you go through. But being a part of ASES, you are around a community of people that love doing the same thing you are passionate about. And so it's easy, it's challenging, it's a balance, but you find the core values through being a part of ASES, because with ASES you learn how to balance both your physical life as well as being a part of the community. I think you learn good values about time management, and that's what's the most important as being a part of, being a student.
That's amazing. And for you?
Yeah, I agree. Like through ASES, I really learned the importance of time management because being a college student, also working and then volunteering, from a glance it sounds like a lot, but ASES really taught me a lot about time management, and also being that I have a purpose and I'm very passionate about it, it doesn't feel like a burden to me. Like I don't feel like stressed out, but I'm like, okay, I know whatever I'm doing in school is gonna bring value to what I do in ASES, and what I'm doing in ASES is gonna bring value to what I'm doing in school.
Yes.
So it all goes hand in hand.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, Victor, can you explain the SAVE movement and how its 4 pillars work together to create lasting change?
Yeah, so the acronym ASSESS stands for Save the Earth from A to Z, but even the SAVE contains the pillars of ASSESS. S is for social awareness, which is to bring the issue to the forefront. One thing we learn is that majority of students don't even know what the Sustainable Development Goals are, but after partnering with ASSESS, they get to understand that these are, the criteria that the UN put out for us to make a change and make the world more sustainable. Even what is sustainability? A lot of students are not aware of this. So the awareness part is just bringing awareness to the issue, and that is the A. Victim relief is helping in the time of disaster. And when disaster strikes, all these causes come to nothing. The important thing is to take care of the disaster at that moment. So then victim relief is essential to that. And naturally, environmental protection, as we're facing this crisis of climate change, is finding ways through which all of us can take part in the solution and to reduce the problem so that we can make it better. So social and awareness and victim relief, environmentalism, they come together to be able to carry out and make the world better for everyone.
And I'm curious, for the students' perspective, whenever we talk about climate change, we often talk about the future, and this is going to be your
Perfect,
future,
right?
of course. So, can you explain, how what the movement means to you and what impact it's having on you?
Right. So you hear all about climate change, global warming in schools from your professors. However, climate change is a broad spectrum. It comes with a lot of different things. And so you can hear about it, but not know where to start. And so that's where I think ASSESS comes into play, because it lets students, those who are passionate about, the home that we'll live in a few years from now, and those who are passionate about it can take the initiative by joining ASSESS. And that's why I think it's perfect that in ASSESS, we not only take initiative, but we learn about the issues that are happening by hosting many forums, and just in general, just you get the idea of what climate change is.
And how does it, what does this movement mean for you as well?
Yeah, I would say at first, prior to me joining ASES, I really didn't have much knowledge on climate change. I just knew it was happening, but I wasn't sure how to put my foot in on helping. But then, as Yurieli mentioned, through the education that we learn in ASES, we really realized wow, this is not just something that's happening in another country, but this is happening right now in our community. Right. So it made me realize that climate change is affecting me.
Now, what are some specific ways ASSESS volunteers have provided social services to underprivileged communities around the world?
So in some parts of the world, we have the Good Student Program, which is we help students learn how to be better students. And even in other parts of the world, we help with teaching the students how to keep their community clean, teaching the students how to keep their environment clean, teaching the students of things that they can partake in, that it's an everyday thing that will help in a bigger picture. And it's mostly about education. It's helping the students understand that they can make a difference. Sometimes as a student, you see the news, you hear these problems, and where do I fit in? But in reality, is their future. The older people will eventually retire and then move on, but they're the ones that take on the problem. So having them understand that at the stage where you are, there are things you can do, and at a later stage you can do other things, then you're just having that foot in front to let them and give them the tools that they need to later on be the change makers.
Now, what does a typical day in the program look like?
Good question. So we hold various forums as well as campaigns. Actually, one of ASSESS Stars campaign that we're holding this Sunday is actually called the Shoulder to Shoulder campaign, where it speaks on school violence. So as we know, school violence is very prevalent, especially in New York City. more specifically, we're speaking about the Bronx. We can see school violence being played out, in various different scenes. And so with the Shoulder to Shoulder campaign, students are able to communicate and discuss and ultimately create a plan on how to create a warmer and safer environment at our schools. And so with the activities that we carry out, we try to carry once a month, but it's not a one-time thing. It's a thing that you carry on. And that's what I like about Assess, is that it develops character, and good character that can influence your community into becoming a brighter community.
And with that being said, Elisa, how has Assess helped you develop leadership skills, and how do you apply them in your daily life?
Oh, that's really good. So Assess really has pushed me out of my comfort zone, I would say. Because I feel like, in school and in my personal life, I've been a leader, but with Assess, I really took on the role of what a leader actually means. Like having to organize cleanup events, having to communicate with public officials, and most importantly, being able to work together in a team goes really hand in hand with strong leadership skills. So Assess is very diverse. It's a lot of personalities, a lot of people from different backgrounds and ethnic groups. So it's having to work together, being united. So it really taught me the importance of being a good listener. That comes a part of being a leader, being organized, and also being organized whenever things can be a bit chaotic. Because when it comes to like event planning, things could go a little crazy. But being composed within all of that and making sure that everyone has a say.
That's amazing. And I've actually seen, Assess, at work, in the streets. I had the privilege, a few years ago to see one of the cleanups, and I remember what was told to me, and it was in an effort to kind of help people in the neighborhood feel safer. Can you explain a little bit more about the thinking behind when you have a cleaner neighborhood, you just automatically feel a little bit safer?
Right. So it's part of the Reduce Crime campaign. So the Reduce Crime campaign tackles crime by giving the community a way to respond to it, which is to make the community cleaner. So studies have shown that cleaner communities have a reduction in crime. And so the people in the neighborhood partaking in making the community cleaner eventually will trigger a safer environment. So that's the Reduce Crime Together campaign. So it started with cleanups around colleges and universities in an effort to improve the living condition in that area, but then eventually translated to neighborhoods where our students live. And so when everyone puts a hand in, then they become more conscious, as we've seen again and again, even here in the Bronx. I mean, in the past 4 years, we've cleaned about 20.5 tons of garbage, just student-led volunteer efforts. And some of the areas we clean have maintained themselves clean because the residents themselves took part in the cleaning. And the students themselves are become vocal and then become conscious. After they clean, then they think twice before throwing that wrapper or, so they try to maintain it. So in that way, we can help the environment and the community become safer and better for everyone.
Right, and I want to add that I've seen the cleanups, and there's a lot of trash bags with a lot of garbage in there. So it really shows that a lot of effort is being put into that. And I think just walking, through the street, you can see the effort that is being put in that. So I guess on behalf of the community, I would say thank you for the work that you're doing.
Appreciate
now, with that, how would you help other young people kind of be involved in an organization like this, or how do you encourage young people who may want to be, on their phone or do things that they find a little bit more fun? How would you encourage them to kind of make a meaningful impact in their community?
I think what makes Assess unique is that it includes young students, and I think that's not something that you see very common. If you do, it is volunteer activity, but not very volunteer, since it might feel like a chore or like a job. But what Assess does is that not only does it inform you on these issues, but we take the initiative, and you are around people that have the same passion as you. So the reason why we carry out these activities is because there are passionate students that want to take the action right now. And so what Assess Star is perfect in applying these values to the community is that these students want to take action right now to make a better future for us that are going to be residing here on Earth for a few years.
And would you expand on that? What would you say to another young person who may see the work that you're doing, but maybe a little bit hesitant to join?
I will say what I love about Assess is that, because people, they hear about Assess and think, oh, we only do cleanup. So we do a variety of different things. Like A common event that we do here, like on campus, is we have like our DIY tote bag event where you paint your own tote bags. We have peace concerts. Like there's different sectors among us where you may feel you don't fit in here, but you will fit in a different area. So even though, let's say you may think, oh, maybe cleaning up is not my thing, but just you joining a small on-campus event, you'll be able to fit in. So that's what I love about us is that you're gonna fit in no matter what personality you have or what skills that you have.
Now I'm curious to hear from all of you, why is youth involvement crucial in addressing global issues such as poverty, climate change, and disaster recovery?
I think they have the biggest stake in the big picture of things because they're the ones inheriting in the problem. And I feel that starting at a young age to understand the issue, it might help them understand what the issue is, and they could be the solution makers of the future. They could be the ones who come together and hold hands and understand, hey, this is all our problem. So that's why I feel that the youth is the most crucial to take on this action, and is the loudest voice in the room because it's theirs to inherit. So I feel that youth involvement is crucial to this whole issue.
Yeah. It might feel overwhelming to hear a lot about the disasters and the things that are going to happen, let's say, in the next 10 years. But when you take that initiative and you join Assess, you really feel a sense of comfort because you know that at least by picking up that one wrapper, it's preventing at least 1 year of, global, the global crisis that we're going through. And that's why youth involvement is super important because you may think that, global warming is happening, all these crises are happening, and you leave it up to the scientists and the people that are at a higher ranking than you. But little do you know, you can be a small town girl, but, you can just be one person. But when you join a group of people that have that same aspiration to better the world, then you don't feel alone. You feel like just by doing this one thing, you're creating a change.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. Like the youth is the future. So if we don't take action now, we can't wait until later because once it comes, we're gonna be in even a worse position. So what I love about us is like, our slogan, the future starts here, because it's starting right here now at the present moment. And we really want to be the ones that are the change makers. We want to inspire others to really take action about climate change. And what I love about us is that we always do it united, and we want to make sure that everyone is included in our mission.
That's amazing. Now, where can people go if they want to join, they want to make a difference? Where can they go to sign up or learn more?
So we have our social media handles and our Instagram at Assess East Coast and our Twitter and our Facebook, right? So they can message us and then they can learn what the next, because it's not just here in the Bronx, we're all over the world and in Brooklyn and Manhattan and all throughout the boroughs. So they can just follow us on our social media handles and then they can learn their next project near their neighborhood.
All right, well, I want to thank you all so much for joining us and talking about your mission.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We have to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. The Alliance for Gun Responsibility strives to save lives and reduce the harm caused by gun violence across communities. Their mission is centered on advocacy, public education, and forming partnerships to make lasting change. Joining us is the Chief of Staff at the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, Ryan Disch-Guzman. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, can you explain the overall mission of the Alliance for Gun Responsibility and the role it plays in advocating for gun violence prevention?
Yeah, so our mission is to prevent gun violence by encouraging a balance of rights with responsibilities. We believe that everyone should be able to exist and live in a safe community. And that means making sure that we have policies and best practices in communities that make sure that we are preventing gun violence, that we are not just reacting to gun violence as a public safety issue, but that we are truly preventing it from occurring in the first place. And that looks all sorts of ways. That's making sure that folks understand the laws that we have that already exist, and making sure we expand upon those laws and things that we know do work. I think we've seen a lot of progress. We're based in Washington State, and so we've made a lot of progress in Washington. We were middle of the road when it came to gun violence prevention and gun safety. And now we're one of the best states in the country when it comes to gun safety. And a part of that has been listening to communities, being very local, being present in our state legislature, and moving to make sure that that communities are safer. We were formed after the Sandy Hook shooting, and a lot of our activist base, a lot of our volunteers and supporters came out of that movement and wanted to make sure that policy shifted. And it's because of that intentionality and making sure that we were listening to folks on the local level that we were able to shift that change. We really believe that change comes from gun violence prevention and gun safety issues at the local level. That's why we're not just interested in supporting Washington State in building out our state efforts, but also states throughout the country and making sure that they have state-based infrastructure to push for gun safety policy and legislation at their local level.
Now, what were some of those key policies that the Alliance advocated for in an effort to prevent gun violence?
Yeah, so one of the big ones that we've supported is an assault weapons ban. That was a really big push for us and took a lot of coalition building, a lot of partnership building. And assault weapons are really important, but they're not the full solution to the puzzle when it comes to gun violence prevention. There's also things like what's commonly known as like a red flag law or an extreme risk protection order. Those are incredibly important because they make sure that those who are at risk of violence and have ownership of a gun are making sure that weapon can be removed for the safety of an individual, of a family. There's a lot of misconceptions around red flag laws or ERPOs. The thing is they're temporary. They're meant to be protective, and they're meant to prevent things like homicides and suicides and domestic violence. So there's laws like assault weapons bans that help, but there's also things that are tools like extreme risk protection orders that we've passed in Washington that truly help save lives because they're able to be a tool that law enforcement can use in a crisis to prevent gun violence. So it's not just these big policies that help move gun violence prevention along, but it's also smaller things too. And like this one of the big pushes that we've done recently is also just to promote community violence intervention orgs and organizations that are working in hospitals and clinics that are also just responding to crisis and trauma and making sure that violence is interrupted really early on. If someone shows up with a gunshot wound to a hospital, they're getting a social worker, they get a mental health professional, and they're getting support from the community. Those are incredibly important as well in interrupting violence, but they're so deeply underfunded. And so one of the big things that we push now is to make sure that those organizations and those groups are truly funded. So there's lots of little pieces that prevent gun violence. We need all of them. We need as many tools in the tool belt as possible. So there's these big policies, and then there's these smaller policies that actually create a big impact too. So it's a big net we try to weave.
Now, what role do grassroots volunteers play in advancing the Alliance's mission, and how can people get involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, our entire movement is built off of grassroots activism. Our organization started as a grassroots organization, like I said, after the Sandy Hook shooting, of folks who wanted to see a change in gun policy. And what's really important, I think, is showing up. I think what has happened in a lot of activism recently is it's become very much online, and a lot of folks stick to their activism online. But I think what truly moves movements is when people show up in community, in person together, and push their local officials, whether it be their city council, their school board, all the way to their governor. If you show up, if you door knock, if you show up during legislative session, if you show up when a policy is coming up on a city council or a county council, matters to people. People notice that, and showing up is really, really, really key. I think on our website, gunresponsibility.org, we have a lot of information around like how to get involved, what it looks like to get involved. I encourage folks to connect with their local organizations that are working on gun violence prevention, particularly community violence intervention orgs that are doing a lot of really incredible work, and asking how you can help, because they always need help, whether it is things like door knocking or showing up at city council or helping to get folks elected who are gun violence prevention champions. The showing up is really key, but it's a really wonderful community of survivors and activists and youth and church members who are all trying to make sure that we save lives in our communities. So I encourage folks to get involved. It's a really beautiful, wonderful community, and we have made progress. It can be a frustrating issue space sometimes, but we've made progress because of our dedicated grassroots activists.
Now, you mentioned something that I thought was very interesting, and that's how a lot of activism is kind of online these days. Now, I can definitely see how that's convenient for a lot of people, but where do you think it's beneficial to kind of be online with your activism? And then, when do you think we should take it to that next step where we're in person?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, especially recently, and I think one of the big ways that we can create impacts is by creating community. And how we do that is when you're online, if you're just engaging with folks that you never see day to day, I would say that doesn't really cause change. What does cause change is when the people you're talking to online are folks in a community that you meet offline, that you create things offline with, that you create support with. That is incredibly important, because I think sometimes in a very digital world, it can be very isolating, and you can often feel very alone. And for gun violence prevention, in the gun violence prevention space, that can often happen, is feeling very alone in your issue space, and like feeling like, am I the only one who feels this way? But I think when you come together as a community, you realize like there's other people that think this way, there's other people that believe in this mission, and you get inspired, you get empowered. So I think it's important to like organize online. I think it's important to like find those common people online, but then it's equally as important to meet those people offline, and build community and community support together. I think that's kind of what we've seen really, really works is, we're not afraid to go to rural communities and talk to folks about, things like safe storage that we know most gun owners agree with and want better access to. So we'll have those conversations with folks, and that's only able to really happen in community, and like talking with people in their community, understanding their community, meeting them where they are. So I think, I think social media and the internet have their uses in terms of organizing, but I think also that organizing needs to have ground support. It needs to have community support. I believe that we grow in our grassroots activism when we're put in uncomfortable situations and with people that don't necessarily agree with us. And that can only really happen offline. But we also built a beautiful, great community in this movement. And I encourage folks to kind of, I know it can be nerve-wracking to kind of meet strangers and develop new community, but I think it's important. I think it's helpful. And I think we have a wonderful community. So that's where I encourage people is like, being on social media makes it easy to just say your opinion and push your activism. But I think what actually moves movements is meeting in community, meeting in the real world, for lack of a better term, with other people, and being and talking with folks, living in community. I think it really does move things.
Now, the Alliance has made significant strides with gun violence prevention laws. How do you ensure that these laws are enforced and have a tangible impact on public safety?
Yeah, that's a great question. And they need to go hand in hand. It's one thing to pass policy, it's a whole other to implement it. And so when we talk to folks, we say, like, yes, we help push and pass policy, but this is a year-round job, and we're making sure that it gets implemented as well. Because you can pass a policy, but if there's no infrastructure to support it, it's just going to fall flat on its face. And so that is where building partnerships is incredibly important. We've built partnerships with law enforcement, with prosecutors, with domestic violence advocates, with, I mentioned before, hospital intervention organizations, community violence intervention organizations, making sure that those folks, when a policy passes, they have the support to make it happen. Little things like grants, making sure they get the grants that have been appropriated during a session, making sure that law enforcement have the tools they need to actually enforce a law. Making sure that mental health professionals are available when those laws get enforced too. So there's all these little moving parts that are incredibly important. And when we make those partnerships within the community, we hear from those folks. Like right now, we're listening to them of like what can be improved, what are policy changes that we can help support them in the legislative session to make sure that those laws and policies are actually applied. So that is an incredibly important part of it. Also, it's just, we as an organization, as an issue space, we have to have a legal strategy because our laws get challenged all the time in the courts. And so making sure that that's also there as well, that when we pass policy, that we feel like it's sound policy that's constitutional, and then having, some great strategic lawyers who are able to defend those laws in courts. So it doesn't just begin and end, at elections and in legislative sessions, but it's also on the outside of it, making sure that communities have all the resources they need to adequately, make sure that gun violence prevention is adhering to public safety and public health. A lot of moving parts there, but making sure that communities have the support they need.
Now, what impact is gun violence having on marginalized communities, and how does the Alliance address these disparities?
Yeah, there's a large disproportionality. Gun violence affects Black and Brown communities at far higher rates, and we see rises across the board, including Black suicide rates, and that is something that we want to make sure that there's intentionality behind it. And I think one of the big reasons we're big advocates for community violence intervention orgs, which are organizations that work in communities that are mostly Black-led organizations that are focusing within the Black community to make sure that there are support and resources for youth, and really working on youth especially, and working on the ground to make sure that folks have housing support, have food support, have mentorship and jobs, and making sure that those communities are truly taken care of, and doing it from a way that's like culturally respectful, that is preventing things like over policing. If they can prevent gun violence within communities, then they can hopefully prevent police interactions, so that communities get what they need. So we really want to see that field grow and build, because in communities where they have really robust community violence intervention organizations, they see a drop in gun violence. And that's just because caring people in their community are coming to them and making sure that they have what they need. And that's incredibly, incredibly important. We want to build up these communities so that they feel supportive and successful. And that's a key of preventing gun violence that folks don't talk about enough, is making sure that communities have basic resources and have community support. We have great partnerships with law enforcement, but it's not enough to just invest in law enforcement. Law enforcement is a reactive response to gun violence. Community violence intervention orgs are a proactive preventative response. And so when we think about disproportionality, it's about making sure that communities have the things that they need. Community violence intervention orgs are a great key to that. And we want to make sure that that field grows.
Now, with that, how do you tailor, your content to educate different, audiences or community members about gun violence? I would say, being from New York, when I think of gun violence, it may be different from how somebody in Texas thinks about gun violence. So, with that in mind, how do you tailor, your education when we're talking about gun violence?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think it's, we need to speak to all communities and different ways that communities view firearms, and in that it's vitally important. I live in a rural area. The way that firearms are talked about here is very different than it is in an urban area. And I think, I can give an example, like, if somebody, a lot of people who own guns, they do it for what they see as their own personal protection. And I think that is, you got to meet people where they are in terms of where they're, why, and a lot of people who live in cities, like that is the main reason why they're owning a firearm. And that comes from all sorts of reasons, for, not trusting law enforcement, feeling that their community is unsafe. Someone might have an abusive partner that they're trying to protect themselves from, any host of reasons why. And I think in entering those conversations, I personally never want to go in those conversations and say, oh, you shouldn't own a firearm and these are the reasons why. I mean, there's lots of stats behind that of how you're more likely to be injured or harmed or killed by your firearm than you are to protect yourself from one. And there's just so many stats on that. But that's not helpful in a situation where someone feels like they need a firearm to protect themselves. They're weighing their risks and they're choosing that. And I think when it comes to that point, how we enter those conversations is listening and then supporting as best as possible. And I think some of the strategies we use are just, around harm reduction, around making sure that, like, hey, if you're going to own a firearm, here's how to safely store it. Here's a place where you can be trained on safe storage. Here's information on extreme risk protection orders, red flag laws, in case, someone in your family feels suicidal, like you can have that gun temporarily removed, things like that. I think talking through that with folks, that's what most people, they want to hear that side of it. They want to know how they can be protective, just in general. I think that's true across communities. So I think it's listening to what that community is saying that they need, and two, giving them tools to protect themselves and to make sure that they're safe if they're going to own a firearm. It's really that listening and that giving people options.
Well, Ryan, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I know that this is a topic that definitely, is a concern for many people across the country. So I truly appreciate you taking the time to speak with us right here in the Bronx. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
We've come to the end of our show today. We hope you enjoyed this week's discussion on the social justice forums. To rewatch this week's edition, you can catch the Recable cast right here on BronxNet.org. If you want to join the conversation and present your point of view, you can visit our social media at BronxNet TV. Join us next week as we continue to elevate the discussion and bring further awareness across the globe. I'm your host, Kibin. Take care and God bless.